My name is Vivian Carter. I'm 35 years old, and for the past 6 years I've worked as a part-time librarian in Charleston. Most people think my life is quiet, predictable, and safe. Just a woman surrounded by books living in a cozy suburban home with her husband. But this morning, as I sat at our old oak dining table watching steam curl from my chipped coffee mug, I realized the truth safety is an illusion. Because across from me stood Grant Mitchell, the man I once loved, now pacing like a caged animal, anger radiating from every tense movement. And in that suffocating silence, I knew my life was about to shatter beyond repair. I watched him pace back and forth across the kitchen floor, his heavy footsteps making the old wooden boards groan in protest. Grant Mitchell, my husband of 6 years, looked like a man ready to explode. His jaw was clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might crack, and every time he turned on his heel to face me, I saw that vein pulsing at his temple. I held my coffee mug between trembling hands, the warmth burning into my palms. I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. I had learned that with Grant, any flicker of fear was fuel. Fuel for his control, fuel for his anger, fuel for his twisted belief that I was his to bend, to break, to remake. The argument from the night before still lingered like acid in the air between us. His sister, Sabrina Mitchell, had called past midnight again, her voice thick with forced tears as she begged for help with her latest emergency. She needed my credit card to pay off her overdraft. Again. Except last time, her overdraft turned out to be a shopping spree at designer outlets. And the time before that, it was a Botox retreat in Miami. When I told her no firmly and clearly, she had sobbed dramatically into the phone accusing me of wanting to see her homeless, humiliated, destroyed. I listened in silence because I knew what was coming next. And I was right. Grant had snatched the phone from my hand, his eyes blazing with fury, as he spat words into the receiver, comforting his sister with promises of money I refused to give. Then he turned on me, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous growl I had come to dread. Now, in the bright morning light, the rage from last night still burned in his eyes. "You're going to give her your card," he said, his tone flat and final. He stood there staring at me like I was something disgusting stuck to his shoe. "She's coming over this afternoon, and you're going to hand it to her with a smile on your face." I swallowed, feeling my throat tighten. My heart thudded against my ribs so violently, it hurt. But my voice came out calm, steady, almost detached. "No," I said quietly. The silence that followed was suffocating. Grant blinked as if the word itself was foreign to him. His lips curled into a sneer. "What did you just say?" I raised my eyes to meet his, feeling the tremor in my fingers spread up my arms. "I said no. I won't do that." His nostrils flared. He took a single step forward. The smell of his aftershave, sharp and clean, mixed with the sourness of old coffee on his breath. "Don't do this, Vivian," he warned softly, almost pitying. "Don't push me." I felt something inside me snap, then something so small, it barely registered, but it was enough. Enough to clear the fog of fear that always surrounded me when he raised his voice. "Grant," I whispered, "this has to stop. Sabrina can't keep draining us like this. We're barely covering bills, and you know it. She needs to fix her own life. We can't fix it for her." His eyes narrowed, his pupils blown wide with rage. He leaned in so close I could see every pore on his skin, the red burst of capillaries under his eyes from too many sleepless nights and whiskey-laced rages. "She's my sister," he snarled. "You wouldn't understand. You're an only child. You don't know what it means to be there for family." I flinched as the words sliced through me. He always went for the softest part, the oldest wound. I grew up alone in silence after losing my parents at 15. I didn't know what it was to have someone who'd always choose you, no matter what. But wasn't that what marriage was supposed to be? I may not have siblings, I said softly, but I know responsibility. And right now, ours is to ourselves, to our home, to our future. This isn't helping Sabrina. It's destroying her and us. For a moment, something flickered in his gaze. Doubt, weariness. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by something darker. He straightened, stepped back, and in one swift, explosive motion, grabbed his coffee mug from the counter and hurled it at me. Time slowed. I watched the dark liquid arc through the air, watched as gravity pulled it down towards my face. The ceramic hit my cheekbone with a dull, sickening crack before shattering into pieces on the floor. Hot coffee splashed across my neck and chest, burning my skin through my blouse. I gasped, pain and shock colliding so violently. I thought I might faint. My vision blurred with tears as I pressed my trembling fingers to my cheek. It burned where the mug struck, and my skin throbbed from the scalding coffee. Grant's chest heaved with ragged breaths. His eyes were wild, unseeing. "You'll pay for this," he hissed, his voice shaking with rage. "She's coming today, and you're going to give her that card. Or you can get the hell out of my house." He turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames on the wall rattled and fell. The crash echoed through the house, through my bones, leaving behind a silence so deep I could hear the blood roaring in my ears. For a long moment I just sat there, frozen, feeling the coffee drip down my blouse, the burn searing into my skin. My eyes fell to the broken mug shards scattered across the floor. They glinted in the morning light like small, sharp truths. This was it. The final straw? There was no going back, no fixing this, no hoping he'd change. My chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. I thought of all the times I told myself he just needed time, that his anger was stress, that his love for his sister was admirable. But love that demands your dignity and sacrifice is not love. It is enslavement. And in that moment, with coffee burning my skin and tears streaming down my face, I felt something powerful take root in me. A fierce, quiet determination. This ends now. As I sat there trembling with coffee burning my skin, my gaze drifted to the floor where the mug shards lay scattered. Among them, something caught the light with a metallic glint. I frowned, blinking back tears, and leaned down. There, half hidden under the table leg, was a small black recording device. My breath caught in my throat. I picked it up with shaking fingers. It was a micro recorder, the kind journalists or private investigators used. My mind spun wildly. Why was this here? Who had placed it? Suddenly it clicked. Sabrina had been here 2 days ago. She'd brought her oversized purse into the kitchen, pacing, while complaining about her landlord. She'd set her bag on this table. My blood ran cold. Had she planted this? Was she recording my fights with Grant? For what evidence, leverage, blackmail? The world tilted around me as realization dawned. This wasn't just about money anymore. Something darker was at play. And in that moment, I knew if I stayed here, I wasn't just risking my dignity. I was risking my life. I held the tiny black recorder in my trembling hand, its sleek metal casing biting into my fever-hot palm like an accusation I couldn't escape. For a moment, the kitchen seemed to tilt around me, cupboards and counters bending and warping, as if I were standing at the edge of a black hole, ready to be swallowed whole. My pulse thundered in my ears. Why would Sabrina Mitchell plant this here? The woman who smiled too wide, who brought store-bought pies to every dinner, and called them homemade, who always touched Grant's arm just a second too long. What was on this tape? What vile secrets had it consumed while it sat hidden in my house, like a spider weaving its invisible trap? How long had it been there, listening to my stifled sobs in the bathroom, the muffled thuds against the bedroom wall, the late-night phone calls to myself when I just needed to hear my own voice, speaking kindly, if only to remember what kindness felt like. The coffee soaking through my blouse felt like nothing, now warm, sticky insignificance, compared to the frigid terror wrapping around my ribs, squeezing tighter with each ragged breath. Was this her plan all along? To record my humiliations, Grant's raging insults, his fists pounding the table inches from my face. Was she going to use it to blackmail me into silence, force me to watch, as she slid into my life piece by piece, until I was nothing but a ghost in the walls? Or was it something darker? Something that twisted even deeper into the marrow of fear I'd been living with for years. I set the recorder down slowly, almost reverently, as though it would bite me if I moved too fast. Its tiny red eye blinked at me from the table, silent, menacing, alive. I stared at it, seeing not metal and wires, but Sabrina's gloating face, her cold eyes glittering with triumph. I looked around my kitchen, my so-called kitchen. The pale blue cabinets Grant forced me to repaint because my soft sage green was too childish and depressive. The antique teacups I hunted for at dusty flea markets, each with its own story, its own past banned by him, because they were cheap garbage that embarrassed guests. The Monet print I loved so much ripped down last month because art is a waste of space, when you could hang a mirror instead. None of it was mine. Not really. This house wasn't my canvas. It was my prison cell decorated by my warden. Every object bore his fingerprints, his decisions, his disdain. Even Bella, our sweet tabby, was just another casualty of his carelessness. I still remembered her soft purr vibrating against my chest, and the dead silence after he left the back door, open, sending her fleeing into the street to die beneath the tires of a speeding truck. Every happy memory was just mold painted over rotting walls. Every dinner party, every flickering candlelit evening, every whispered promise in the dark illusions. Lies. I could almost hear the house breathing around me, its walls swollen with all the words I never said, pulsing with the secrets I buried to keep the peace. I wondered if the recorder was still running, if Sabrina was listening live right now. Maybe parked down the block in her pristine white Lexus, smirking as she clutched her overpriced latte, relishing the moment I found her trap. I imagined her smug face glowing in the dashboard light, satisfied that now she held every card, and I held only fear. My vision blurred with hot, helpless tears. The recorder blurred. The cabinets blurred my own reflection. In the oven door blurred until all I saw was a woman I didn't recognize, hunched, trembling small. I rose shakily, the damp fabric of my blouse clinging to my skin like a shroud, and staggered into the hallway. The photos lining the walls stared back at me, silent witnesses to my unraveling. Grant in his tailored suit, Sabrina with her perfect pageant smile, and me forever leaning away from her, even when I didn't know why. I reached up with a hand I didn't feel, and ripped down our wedding photo. The frame cracked against the floorboard's glass, splintering into dagger shards across our frozen smiles. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Something in me snapped then. It didn't splinter. It broke clean, sharp final, like a bone breaking so it could heal properly. For the first time in so many wasted years, clarity rose inside me, quiet and unstoppable. This was never my house. This was never my marriage. This was never my life. And if I stayed here one more day, I would die. Not all at once, no, he'd never grant me that mercy. But piece by piece, smile by smile, hope by hope, until I burned down to nothing but wax residue on a table no one bothered to clean. I turned to look at the recorder one last time. It didn't matter what Sabrina had captured. It didn't matter if Grant knew or if the whole damn world knew. What mattered was what I was about to do next. Because for the first time in years, I remembered something far more powerful than fear. I remembered I was still alive, and I wasn't going to waste that ever again. As I stood there staring at the shattered photo frame, the recorder still clutched in my trembling hand, a memory suddenly surfaced, a stray moment I'd dismissed as irrelevant at the time. 2 weeks ago, Sabrina had come by unannounced. Grant wasn't home and she'd insisted on using the bathroom. She'd been gone an unusually long time. When she re-emerged, her eyes glittered with something I couldn't place. She patted my arm and whispered, "Don't worry, Vivian. Soon you won't have to worry about anything ever again." At the time, I thought it was her usual cryptic drama. Now bile rose in my throat, as dread coiled in my stomach. I rushed down the hallway, heart pounding, throwing open the bathroom cabinet doors. I dug through bottles of Advil NyQuil sleeping pills, Pepto-Bismol. Then I saw it, a small amber pill bottle tucked behind the mouthwash. My name was on the label. But the prescription, it wasn't mine. Hands shaking violently, I read the label, lorazepam high dosage, a sedative. My vision went black around the edges. They weren't just recording me. They were drugging me. Suddenly, every moment of unexplained drowsiness, the days I woke up disoriented on the sofa, with no memory of how I got there, it all clicked into place. Grant's forced kindness those mornings, Sabrina's triumphant little smirks, they were setting me up for what I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. If I didn't leave now, I wouldn't survive to find out. I staggered backwards from the bathroom cabinet, clutching the pill bottle in one trembling hand and the recorder in the other, their combined weight dragging me down like anchors tied to my bones. My chest heaved with ragged, rasping breaths as the walls seemed to buckle inward, pressing closer with every heartbeat until I felt the sharp edges of panic scraping against my ribs. Lorazepam, high dosage. My name printed neatly in sterile, unfeeling black ink on the label. Except I had never been prescribed sedatives. Ever. The truth didn't seep in gently. It slammed into me with brutal force, knocking the air from my lungs in a single silent scream. Every unexplained fatigue, every lost hour spent, sprawled on the couch staring blankly at nothing. Every morning when my brain felt wrapped in suffocating fog, so thick I could barely form thoughts, all of it sharpened into sickening clarity. I thought it was stress from Grant's constant criticisms. I thought it was depression because nothing I ever did was enough. But it was them, Grant and Sabrina. The realization sent molten fear coursing through my veins. My knees buckled, giving out beneath the crushing weight of knowledge, and I collapsed to the cold bathroom tile. The pill bottle rattled in my white-knuckled grip, echoing off the porcelain sink and tile walls like the death knell of my sanity. Tears poured down my burning cheeks so fast and hot, they scalded my skin as they fell. What were they planning? My mind raced with terrifying possibilities. Were they recording my slurred, incoherent ramblings while drugged to prove I was unstable, unfit, a danger to myself? Were they building an airtight case to lock me away in some sterile psychiatric ward where my protests would be dismissed as delusions? Or worse, were they erasing me piece by piece from my own life so that when I finally accidentally overdosed, no one would question it, no one would suspect a thing? A guttural sob tore from my throat, raw and feral, echoing off the walls, until it sounded like another woman was screaming alongside me, a woman I used to be, a woman I didn't recognize anymore. Because this wasn't just about losing my dignity. This wasn't just about losing my marriage, my home, or the fragile sense of self I clung to. This was about losing my life, my existence, my name, my memories, my story. The scream rose higher in my chest, rattling my ribs, but I forced it down with sheer survival instinct, biting so hard into my lip, I tasted coppery blood. Panic wouldn't save me now. Only action would. I crawled out of the bathroom on shaking limbs, dragging myself like a wounded animal towards the kitchen. The pill bottle clutched in one hand, the recorder in the other. My vision blurred with tears as I reached the countertop, fumbling blindly for my phone. My trembling fingers scrolled through my contacts, names swimming before me in a haze of terror and hopelessness. And then I saw her, Jenna Wallace. Her name burned through the fog, like a lighthouse through a midnight storm. Jenna, my best friend from college, the woman who sat up with me for hours after my mother's funeral, feeding me soup and wrapping me in blankets when grief left me too hollow to move. The woman Grant said was too opinionated, too loud, too single to understand real marriage, until slowly, guilt by guilt, year by year, I let him push her away. I didn't deserve her, but right now she was my only hope. My thumb hovered over her name, trembling so violently I thought I might drop the phone altogether. Doubt crept in dark and insidious. What if she didn't answer? What if she heard my shaking voice and thought I was crazy? What if I really was crazy? But then another voice rose within me, fierce and guttural, forged in the furnace of years of silent suffering. If you don't call her, you die here. With a breath that felt like tearing open my lungs, I pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello. Her voice, warm, bright, real, sliced through the darkness like a blade of pure light. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My lips moved, but no words came out. Tears streamed down my face, blurring the phone screen. As my shoulders shook with silent sobs, the recorder lay in my palm, heavy, and accusing its cold metal digging into my flesh. Vivian. Her voice sharpened with worry. Hey, are you okay? What's wrong? Talk to me. And then it all came pouring out, unstoppable. The recorder hidden in my kitchen. The coffee that made me sleep for hours. The screaming and bruises. The sedatives with my name printed in unforgiving black ink. My voice cracked and broke, splintering into whispers and sobs. But I didn't stop. I told her everything. Every vile detail of the prison I called home. She listened silently. I could hear her quiet breathing, steady and grounding, and the faint laughter of her children, playing somewhere far away in a world that was still safe and bright and good. Finally, her voice came strong and unyielding, vibrating with rage she was fighting to control. Listen to me, Vivian. You are leaving that house. Right now. Do you hear me? You're coming here. I don't give a damn what Grant thinks. I don't care what Sabrina wants. Pack a bag, grab your phone charger, take your keys, and drive. To me. Do you understand? A sob tore from my throat, half relief, half agony, as I pressed my forehead to the cold countertop. For the first time in years, a sliver of hope pierced the darkness, flooding through my veins like morphine, numbing the terror just enough for me to breathe. Yes. I whispered, I hear you. Good. She said, her voice trembling with tears and fury. Because I will not let them destroy you. And Vivian, yeah. My voice cracked like thin ice. You are stronger than this. Stronger than them. Now move. I hung up, adrenaline surging through my limbs, burning away the last vestiges of numbness. I wiped my tears with the back of my shaking hand and looked around the kitchen one final time at the broken mug on the floor. The spilled coffee, the recorder glinting menacingly in the dim morning light. This house wasn't my home. This marriage wasn't my life. This was a cage built from my own silence, and I was done being a prisoner. I grabbed my keys, my bag, and my phone, and without looking back, I walked out the door into a future I didn't know. But for the first time, it was mine. I moved through the house like a ghost, silent, invisible, weightless. my bare feet brushing across the cold floorboards, as if I'd already died and left only a shell behind. Every creak underfoot sent splinters of panic shooting up my spine, but I forced myself to keep moving. My heart beat so hard I thought the vibrations might shake pictures off the walls, exposing my escape before I could even reach the door. I half expected Grant's voice to slice through the silence at any second, heavy with venomous disappointment. I could almost feel his iron grip closing around my wrist, bruising my skin as he yanked me backwards into his darkness. I could almost hear Sabrina's silky laughter behind him, that cruel little exhale she always made when she knew she'd won. But there was only silence, thick, watching, waiting. I yanked open the closet and grabbed my old navy duffel bag. My fingers trembled so violently I nearly dropped it onto my foot. I shoved clothes in blindly worn jeans, faded t-shirts, underwear, socks, the soft gray cardigan my mother knitted the winter before she died. The smell of lavender sachets rose from the folded cotton, punching grief into my chest so sudden and sharp I nearly doubled over. I stuffed in my laptop, its cracked screen, peeking through the zipper, and my charger. I opened my jewelry box and my vision blurred as I slipped my parents' wedding rings inside, along with the tiny gold dove pendant my mother gave me on my 16th birthday. It felt like packing away my own heart. I paused at the bathroom door staring at the amber pill bottle, where I'd left it on the counter. Lorazepam, my name in neat black print. A chill rolled down my spine. My shaking fingers grabbed a Ziploc bag from the kitchen drawer and sealed the bottle inside. Evidence? Proof that if I never made it out, someone would know the truth. Someone would know I didn't just fade away willingly. In the bedroom, I dropped to my knees beside the nightstand. I reached behind it, heart-pounding fingers brushing the cold steel of the lockbox I hid years ago. Back then, I told myself it was a silly precaution, grocery change, tucked away freelance payments. I never deposited birthday money. Jenna insisted I keep for emergencies only. I never believed I'd actually need it. But today, that small stack of 20s and 50s felt like salvation. I shoved the cash into my purse and stood swaying for a moment, as dizziness threatened to take me down. I looked around the room for what I knew was the last time. The cream walls Grant repainted because he said bright colors were immature and desperate for attention. The empty nail where my Monet print once hung before he called it pretentious garbage. The bed where he once whispered that I was his whole world before it became the battlefield, where I curled into myself waiting for anger to pass like a violent storm. And in that moment, I felt nothing. No grief, no nostalgia, just a deep aching hollowness where all my wasted years lay buried. Downstairs, I pulled on my sneakers with shaking hands. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door and glanced at the dining table. The tiny black recorder sat there like a sleeping viper, its blank eye glinting in the morning light. For a second, I hesitated. My pulse roared in my ears. Then I stepped forward, picked it up, and pressed the record button. Holding it to my lips, I whispered, "I know what you're doing, and I'm done. Goodbye." My voice sounded alien, low, steady cold, as winter rain. I set the recorder down, still running, and turned away. Outside, the air was washed with pale winter sunlight. Frost sparkled across the lawn like a scattering of glass shards. The cold bit into my cheeks, but felt cleaner than any breath I had taken in years. I hurried to my car, my duffel bag banging against my hip, my purse slung over one trembling shoulder. Tears blurred my vision as I shoved the bag into the back seat and collapsed into the driver's seat. For a moment, I just sat there, chest heaving, staring at the house where I thought I'd build a family, grow old beside a man who loved me, raise children who felt safe and free. The house where I thought love meant sacrifice, where I let myself rot piece by piece to keep the peace. No more. I twisted the keys in the ignition. The engine roared to life beneath me, vibrating through my bones like a promise. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror. My hair was tangled, eyes red-rimmed, and swollen skin blotched with tears and bruises. But deep beneath the raw wreckage of my reflection, I saw something fierce glinting back at me, something wild and unbreakable that had been waiting patiently in the dark all these years. I drove away without looking back. Each mile I put between myself and that house felt like oxygen, flooding my starving lungs, clearing out the poison, lighting a fire in the marrow of my bones. For the first time in years, the road ahead was mine, terrifying, uncertain, wide open. But it was freedom, and freedom I realized was worth every bruise, every scar, every single price. Because I was alive, and no one, not Grant, not Sabrina, not even my own fear was ever going to take that away from me again. I didn't remember the drive. I only remembered the numbness, how my hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white, how my eyes stayed locked on the endless gray road, refusing to blink away tears in case I swerved off into oblivion. By the time I pulled into Jenna's driveway, the sun was sinking low, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban street. Her house was small, painted buttercream yellow with white shutters and a porch swing that swayed gently in the winter breeze. I sat in my car for a full minute, engine idling, staring at the warmth glowing through her windows. The laughter of her children echoed faintly from inside, muffled by glass and distance. It felt like pressing my face to the outside of a life I once dreamed of but never allowed myself to want. Then the front door flew open. There she was, Jenna Wallace. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, strands curling wildly around her face, and she wore an oversized hoodie splattered with toddler fingerprints. But her eyes were exactly the same as the girl who used to study with me in the library, until dawn, whispering secrets between pages of Dostoevsky and Plath. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then I saw her lips tremble. Oh, Vivi. She sprinted down the front steps barefoot, despite the cold, and wrenched open my car door before I could even unbuckle my seatbelt. Her arms wrapped around me so tightly it hurt, but the pain felt clean, real, human. I buried my face in her shoulder, sobs tearing free from my chest, violent and unstoppable. The smell of her coconut shampoo filled my lungs, and I clung to her as if she were the last solid thing in a world made of glass. "I've got you," she whispered fiercely, one hand cradling the back of my head. "You're safe now. Do you hear me? You're safe." I didn't know how long we stood there, rocking back and forth on her driveway, as the winter sun died behind us. Eventually, she pulled back just enough to cup my tear-soaked face in her hands. Her eyes roved over the bruise blooming across my cheekbone, the dried coffee stains on my blouse, the wild terror still lurking behind my tears. "Let's get you inside," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with fury. I knew wasn't directed at me. "Tom took the kids to his parents. It's just us tonight." She led me into the house, her arm firm around my waist, anchoring me to the here and now. The warmth of her home enveloped me instantly. Soft lamplight spilled across hardwood floors, framed family photos lined the walls, and the smell of simmering stew wafted from the kitchen. It felt human, lived in, real. She helped me sit on her worn leather sofa and wrapped a thick knitted blanket around my shoulders. I clutched it to my chest, breathing in the scent of lavender and home. "I'll make tea," she said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Chamomile." "You used to love that." When she returned with 2 steaming mugs, I was still staring blankly at the carpet, trying to quiet the roaring in my mind. She sat across from me, cradling her own cup in both hands. For a long time, she didn't say anything. She just let me sit there in silence, safe in the knowledge that she wouldn't fill it with questions I wasn't ready to answer. Finally, my voice cracked out hoarse and broken. "I think they were drugging me." Her eyes sharpened with alarm, but she didn't interrupt. I told her everything, the recorder hidden under the table, the pill bottle with my name but not my prescription, Sabrina's cryptic warning. My words tumbled out in a jagged rush, shaking with horror and disbelief. When I finished, Jenna leaned forward, her gaze fierce and unflinching. "Listen to me, Vivian," she said, her voice trembling with barely restrained rage. "Whatever they were planning ends now. You're not alone in this. Tomorrow we're going to the police, then to a lawyer, and we'll make sure they never touch you again." Tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and relentless. I had been bracing myself for doubt, for pity, for patronizing concern. Instead, I got Jenna Wallace, the woman who once punched a frat boy, for groping me at a party, and then dragged me to Taco Bell at 3 a.m. to celebrate. I choked out a broken laugh through my tears. "God, I missed you." She smiled, eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "I missed you too, Vivi. But you're here now, and we're going to get you your life back." Outside, the darkness settled thick and cold across the street. But inside Jenna's living room, wrapped in her blanket with chamomile steam curling around my face, I felt the first fragile flicker of warmth bloom in my chest. For the first time in years, I believed her. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe this was the beginning. Jenna drove me downtown that afternoon, her knuckles white around the steering wheel as we crawled past frost-streaked sidewalks and rusted traffic lights blinking in the pale winter sun. The city felt different today. Less like a maze built to trap me, more like 1,000 roads branching out into a freedom I'd almost forgotten could exist. We parked in front of a tall brick building, ivy clinging to its sides like green veins against red stone. Gold lettering gleamed on the glass door, Naomi Pierce Family Law and Advocacy. I read it twice, the words swimming before my eyes, grounding me with their promise of something I hadn't dared name: protection. Inside, warmth wrapped around me, instantly pressing against my frozen skin. Soft yellow lamplight spilled across plush armchairs and mahogany shelves lined with framed diplomas and gentle abstract paintings that felt like quiet affirmations. A diffuser on the corner table released fragrant lavender mist into the hushed air, its scent threading into my chest and untangling the tight knots of panic coiled there. Naomi Pierce stood to greet us, tall, black, early 40s. Her coiled braids were pinned back elegantly, framing a face carved with both fierce intelligence and profound stillness. Her dark eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that stripped away every lie I'd forced myself to believe. When she reached out to shake my hand, her grip was firm, warm, anchoring. Her gaze flickered to the bruise blooming across my cheekbone, but she didn't flinch. She didn't look away. "Vivian," she said, her voice low and powerful, like distant thunder. "You're safe here. Let's get to work." For the next 2 hours, she built the architecture of my freedom brick by brick, word by word. She explained how to file for divorce under domestic abuse statutes, what it would take to place an immediate freeze on our joint accounts before Grant could drain them dry, how to gather medical records, prescription histories, and every hidden receipt to build a restraining order case, if necessary. As she spoke, my silent tears slid down hot and unstoppable, leaving shining trails across my raw skin. I felt Jenna's hand squeeze mine under the polished oak table, her thumb brushing circles against my knuckles, grounding me in her quiet, furious love. Naomi didn't flinch at my tears. She didn't pity me or rush to comfort me with hollow words. She saw them, acknowledged them with a slow blink, and continued laying out my steps like a general, planning her soldier's return from a war no one else believed existed. When we finally left a thick stack of papers and instructions clutched to my chest like a shield, the winter air slapped my lungs clean. I inhaled deeply, letting it burn away the stale fear lodged in the hollows of my ribs. "Come on," Jenna said, her eyes soft with relief despite the exhaustion pulling at her features. "One more stop." She drove us 3 blocks down to the Paper Finch, a small independent bookstore tucked between an old bakery and a florist shop, its painted green facade glowing against the grey street. Through the large windows, handwritten staff pics were taped to the glass in curling script, little pieces of human warmth waving hello from behind the frosty panes. Inside, the smell hit me like a tidal wave of memory. Paper ink, polished wood floors, the faint sweetness of cinnamon tea steeping somewhere in the back. It smelled like safety, like a childhood library on rainy afternoons, like possibility. "Hey, Vivian," a bright voice called out. Behind the counter stood Maya, a woman in her late 20s with dark curly hair, piled high in a patterned scarf, round gold glasses perched on her nose. She beamed at me, eyes bright and warm. "Jenna told me everything. We'd love to have you join the team. Just a few shifts to start stocking shelves and handling register if you're comfortable, but it's yours if you want it." For a long moment, words failed me. Tears blurred my vision until all I could see were fractured shapes of colored spines and glowing fairy lights strung along the ceiling beams. My entire life had been about him, what he wanted me to do, who he wanted me to become, how small I needed to shrink to fit the frame he carved for me. But standing here surrounded by books lined like quiet, steadfast friends, I felt something stir deep in my chest, a faint flicker of warmth pulsing through my bones. Hope. I swallowed hard, blinked back tears, and nodded, my voice cracking like thawing ice. Yes, I'd love that." Maya's grin widened as she clapped her hands together softly, and Jenna wrapped her arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. I leaned into her warmth, into her courage, into the solid reminder that I was no longer alone. As we left, the small brass bell above the door and chimed its bright note, ringing out into the winter afternoon. The clouds parted for a brief golden moment, and sunlight spilled across the sidewalk, like blessing. I closed my eyes and felt its warmth kiss my frozen skin. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving for someone else. I wasn't hiding, apologizing, shrinking. I was building, step by step, page by page. And maybe this was the first chapter of a story that belonged entirely to me. One I would write with my own trembling but unbreakable hand, fierce, flawed, and finally free. They came just after sunset. I saw their car pull up from Jenna's living room window, Grant's sleek black Audi sliding to the curb like a predator stalking its prey. Its polished hood gleamed under the flickering streetlight, and for a moment I saw myself reflected in its darkness, the woman I used to be, small and silent and trembling. Sabrina sat perched in the passenger seat, her hair pulled into a glossy chignon lipstick, painted into a smile so precise it could cut glass. Even from the window, I could see the gleam of victory in her eyes. My stomach twisted into knots so tight, I thought I might collapse. But Naomi's hand on my shoulder grounded me. Her grip was steady and warm, her voice a blade wrapped in velvet as she whispered, "They can't hurt you here. Remember that?" The doorbell rang a moment later, slicing through the quiet house like a guillotine. Jenna walked to the door and flung it open, before their fists could slam against it again, her spine straight and her face carved from granite. Grant's eyes locked onto mine instantly, wild bloodshot veins pulsing down his neck. He looked unhinged, the mask he wore for so long, finally cracking under the strain. "Vivian!" He barked, his voice raw with rage. "What the hell is this?" You ignore my calls. You run away. And now you're filing for divorce. You think you can just walk out and destroy everything I've built." His words exploded in the room, reverberating off the pale walls lined with Jenna's framed art prints and bookshelves crammed with poetry and law journals. I stood in the middle of it, all surrounded by the scent of lavender oil, the flickering candles, the quiet hum of safety. For the first time in years, his voice didn't shake me apart. Naomi stepped forward calm and commanding. Her presence felt like an iron gate locking shut in front of me. "Mr. Reynolds," she said evenly, her voice steel under silk. "I am Vivian's attorney. You are here at her discretion. Keep that in mind before you say another word." Grant's sneer faltered for half a second,